For 19 years of marriage, I had always been convinced that I had a stable marriage that others envied. My husband, Ethan, was gentle and considerate. Every weekend he would accompany me to the supermarket to shop for the family's groceries. In the eyes of outsiders, we were the model couple everyone praised. That Saturday afternoon, the supermarket was bustling with noise, the mingled scents of snacks and fresh produce filling the air. I was pushing a cart full of daily necessities to the checkout when Ethan, carrying 2 cartons of milk behind me, suddenly stopped and smiled, patting me on the shoulder. "I'm going out for a smoke, just a few minutes. You go ahead and pay, wait for me." His tone was natural, his eyes without a hint of evasion. I didn't suspect a thing. I nodded and watched him turn and walk out the supermarket doors. As I checked my items, I was already planning the braised pork ribs I would make for dinner, his favorite, feeling a warm, ordinary contentment. 19 years of living side by side had made me accustomed to trusting him in everything. I never imagined that a few minutes would tear open a shocking deception that had been hidden for years. While waiting in line, I kept glancing out the glass doors, but Ethan was nowhere to be seen. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I called his phone, it went straight to voicemail. A faint unease began to creep into my heart. Just as I was anxiously preparing to grab my shopping bags and go look for him, a supermarket employee in a blue uniform, Oliver, walked over slowly, looking troubled. He gently tugged at my sleeve. Please come with me to the office for a moment. There's something I really can't stand by and not tell you." My heart sank, my hands and feet went cold. I instinctively asked if something had happened to Ethan. The employee just shook his head, led me silently through the aisles into the back storage room, pulled out his phone, and showed me a surveillance video. The screen clearly showed Ethan, after leaving, not smoking at all, but walking straight to a white car in the parking lot. In the passenger seat sat a young woman, Chloe, with delicate makeup. They embraced intimately. He reached out and gently stroked her swollen belly, then bent to kiss her forehead. Even more glaring was the limited edition necklace box sitting in the passenger side cubby, the same one I had mentioned to Ethan just yesterday, the one I couldn't bring myself to buy. Oliver sighed and told me quietly that for the past 6 months, every Saturday, Ethan had used the excuse of stepping out for a smoke to meet this woman, sometimes even buying baby supplies in the supermarket's maternity section. I stared at the familiar profile on the screen, trembling uncontrollably. 19 years of youth, I had managed the household, cared for his parents, scrimped and saved to support his business. I thought our marriage would last until old age, but it had all been an elaborate lie from start to finish. I heard the familiar footsteps outside. Ethan strolled back into the supermarket, his face still wearing that gentle smile, completely unaware that I had just uncovered the cruel truth he had hidden for so long. Our 19-year marriage shattered in that instant. The glow of the phone screen pierced my eyes like shards of glass. I stared at the surveillance footage, Ethan's palm pressed against that woman's swollen belly, his fingertips slightly indenting the fabric. I knew that gesture too well. Whenever I was pregnant and uncomfortable, he would rub my lower back the same way, with just the right pressure to ease the ache. Now those same fingers were caressing another woman's child. Are you all right?" Oliver's voice came from far away. I opened my mouth, but my throat felt stuffed with wet cotton. 19 years, every morning at 6:30 I made him coffee. He knew I couldn't drink it bitter, so he'd always pour half a cup of milk in first. Last year on my birthday, he came home late from overtime and pulled a silk scarf from his suit pocket, saying he'd seen it at a client event and thought the color would suit me. I never wore that scarf even once, because the tag still had the store's discount sticker on it, and that store was right across from the supermarket, a 3-minute walk. So even his lies were done with minimal effort. The storage room was stacked with cardboard boxes, the air carrying the musty smell of damp paper. I gripped the edge of a metal cabinet, digging my nails into my palm. The pain helped clear my head slightly. Footsteps sounded outside, leather shoes on tile, unhurried, Ethan's usual gait. He pushed the door open, still wearing a smile, holding 2 boxes of strawberries. When he saw me and Oliver standing together, his eyebrow twitched. "What's wrong?" "Phone dead." He set the strawberries on a nearby carton and reached out to put his arm around my shoulder. "Done checking out?" I stepped back. His arm hung in midair, fingertips just 2 inches from my shoulder. In that moment I noticed a faint pink mark on the side of his pinky, a lipstick smudge, light, like a petal pressed against skin. He didn't usually wear cologne, but now that he was close, I caught an unfamiliar floral fruity scent, cloyingly sweet, tickling my nose. Oliver discreetly stepped back to the door and said quietly, "I've exported the footage, if you need it." "What footage?" Ethan's gaze darted between me and Oliver. His tone was still gentle, but I saw his Adam's apple bob. That was his habit before lying. 19 years ago, when he proposed and said I'll be good to you for the rest of my life, his Adam's apple moved just like that. At the time I thought it was nerves. Now I realized even his proposal had been a performance. I held up my phone to his face. The screen was playing the moment he bent to kiss Chloe's forehead. The woman had long lashes, a pointed chin, looked under 30. Her belly was clearly visible, at least 5 or 6 months along. Ethan stared at the screen, the color drained from his face layer by layer, until he turned ashen. "Lynn Wan, let me explain." "Explain what?" My voice was calmer than I expected, as if I were reading a shopping list. "Explain why you come out to see her every Saturday. Or explain that necklace. I told you yesterday I really liked it. You said it was too expensive and would wait for a sale, then you bought it for her right away." "Ethan, how long does a sale take?" 6 months. A year. Can you afford to wait?" His lips moved, his gaze dropped, then rose again. 19 years, every argument, no matter who was at fault, he was always the one to apologize, kneeling halfway down, looking up at me with light in his eyes, saying "I'm sorry, honey, don't be mad." Now his gaze was still the same, but I could see clearly that the light was just a reflection from the window, fragile on the surface of his pupils, shattering at the slightest touch. "Her name is Chloe. She's the new accountant at the branch office," he finally said, his voice low. "We met in March this year. Back then, there were some issues between us. You were always ignoring me." I laughed. Ignoring him? Last year when his father had a cerebral hemorrhage and was hospitalized, I stayed outside the ICU for 4 days and nights, sleeping only 3 hours a day. He came twice, stayed less than half an hour each time, said he had work. Later, when the old man recovered, he held my hand and said thank you for all your hard work in the same tone you'd praise a nanny. This spring, he came home at 2 in the morning for 3 months straight. When I asked what he was busy with, he said fundraising, that it would be over soon. I believed him. Every morning I ironed his suits and hung them on the outermost rack in the closet, matched his ties and laid them on the hanger. He came home later and later. I ironed more and more clothes. His shirts went from 1 row to 2 to 3. It wasn't overtime, it was time being divided with someone else. "So you think it's my fault?" My nails dug deeper into my palm, a dull pain. "Because I ignored you, you could sleep with another woman, get her pregnant, and buy her things I couldn't even afford." Ethan took half a step forward, raising both hands in a surrendering gesture, a move that always used to make me laugh. This time it only made me nauseous. "Lynn Wan, listen to me. I never meant to break up this family. Chloe, she didn't know I had a family. I lied to her, told her I was divorced. That necklace, she said she liked it, and I acted on impulse. If you want, I'll return it tomorrow, really." "Return it?" I looked at him, feeling 19 years collapse into a black hole, sucking away all trust and warmth. "Ethan, you have a child with her, and you think returning a necklace makes it all better?" Oliver cleared his throat at the door and said quietly, "The surveillance footage goes back to January of this year. Every Saturday between 3 and 4 in the afternoon, that lady would wait in the parking lot. Sometimes they'd stay in the car for 10 minutes or so, sometimes they'd go into the supermarket maternity section together and buy formula, diapers." "Enough." Ethan whipped his head around, his voice finally cracking with an anger I'd never heard from him. "This is my family matter. It's none of a store clerk's business." Oliver said nothing, just looked at me. His eyes were young, like a fresh college graduate's, clear and clean. I suddenly remembered 19 years ago, when I first met Ethan, he looked at me the same way, saying you have a beautiful smile. Back then he worked as a salesman at a small company, making $6,000 a month. It took him half a month's savings to take me out for a nice dinner. Later he started his own business. I quit my job to help him manage accounts, personnel, logistics. The company grew from 3 people to 30, to 300. He came home in nicer and nicer cars, but later and later. I thought that's just how career-driven men were, it would get better after this busy stretch. But that busy stretch never ended, he just took a different road, and at the end of that road stood another person. Out, I said to Oliver, softly. Oliver hesitated, nodded, and left, pulling the door shut behind him. In the storage room, it was just me and Ethan, cardboard boxes piled in the corner, the fluorescent light above buzzing, its white glare making him look 10 years older. He reached for me, I pulled away, and his wrist smacked against the metal cabinet corner with a dull thud. He sucked in a breath, pulled his hand back, looked at the reddening skin, then looked up at me again. When did it start? I asked. Don't tell me March. The supermarket footage goes back to January. He was silent for a moment, then fished a pack of cigarettes from his pocket, pulled one out, and put it between his lips without lighting it. It was an old habit, he always needed to hold a cigarette when nervous. I used to find it endearing, now I found it pathetic. Late last year, he finally said, his voice muffled. At the company annual party. She drank too much. I drove her home, just that once. Then she said she was pregnant. I didn't know what to do. She said I didn't have to take responsibility, but she's alone in this city, doesn't have many friends. I couldn't just abandon her. So you've been coming with her to prenatal checkups every Saturday? I stared at him. And buying groceries as cover? Ethan, which hospital is she going to, City Maternity or Central? Have you already picked a C-section date? Do her parents know you exist? Do they know you're married? His face grew even more ashen. The cigarette fell from his lips, hit the floor, and rolled twice before stopping beside the strawberry boxes, bright red, like 2 cartons of congealed blood. Her family doesn't know I'm married. He crouched to pick up the cigarette, moving slowly, as if his back had suddenly aged. She said after the baby's born, she'll go back to her hometown and it won't affect our life. Lynn Wan, I just couldn't bear to see her all alone. Couldn't bear it. I closed my eyes, leaning the back of my head against the cold metal cabinet, its edges pressing into my spine, aching inch by inch. 19 years ago when I was pregnant, I couldn't keep anything down, sat hugging the toilet every day crying. He came home from work, cooked a pot of kanji, and fed me spoonful by the bedside. He said you've worked so hard, honey, with that same unbearable tenderness in his eyes. Later when the baby was born, he got up in the middle of the night to make formula and change diapers, dark circles under his eyes. I still thought he had it hard. When our son was 5, his business failed once, leaving a debt of $400,000. I secretly sold the old house my mother had left me to help him pay it off, without telling his parents. He held me on the balcony and cried, saying he would be worthy of me for life. I believed him, gave him a second child, wrecked my health, and could never get pregnant again. Now he was telling me he couldn't bear to see another woman have a baby alone. Ethan. I opened my eyes, my voice finally beginning to tremble. Do you know why I can never get pregnant again? He looked up, his face blank with confusion. That expression was like a knife, thrusting up from the bottom of my chest, piercing stomach, lungs, throat until all sound got stuck behind my teeth, coming out as almost inaudible breath. He didn't know. 19 years, and he'd never asked the doctor why my health had been so poor after our second child, why we never had another baby. He just assumed it was my age, or that he was too busy, everything else didn't matter. He had a wife, kids, hot meals, he'd come home, collapse on the sofa, and life went on. You don't even know that. I let out a bitter laugh, tears falling onto my phone screen, blurring his profile in the surveillance footage into a smear of light. Ethan, you don't even know why I can't have more children, and you're talking to me about not bearing to see someone else suffer. He stood up, lips trembling, eyes reddening. That expression used to soften me when he was sick or had a rough day at work. He'd lean on my shoulder like that, and I'd hold his head and say it's okay, you've got me. Now all I felt was absurdity, a man who had a child with another woman, standing in front of me with reddened eyes, wanting sympathy. Or forgiveness. "I'm going home," I said, tucking my phone into my pocket, bending to pick up the shopping bag on the floor. Inside were ribs, ginger, scallions, cooking wine, and the bean curd sticks he loved. I'd picked the freshest ones that morning. The plastic handles cut into my fingers, heavy with weight. "Lynn Wan. You stay with her." I didn't look back, my voice caught in my throat. "She's pregnant, she shouldn't be alone. Whether you come home for dinner tonight is up to you." When I pushed through the door, Oliver was standing by the checkout counter. Seeing me come out, he quickly stepped forward with a bottle of water. Would you like some water?" I shook my head, but took the bottle, unscrewed it, and took a sip. The cold water went down my throat and made me cough twice. Oliver hesitated, looking behind me. Ethan hadn't followed. The storage room door was half open, a white line of fluorescent light leaking through the crack. "That surveillance video," Oliver said softly. "I actually noticed him for months. He came every Saturday. At first I just thought it was odd, a man hanging around the baby section every week. Then I saw he was always meeting someone in that car in the parking lot, so I kept an eye out. I thought you deserved to know." "Thank you." I looked at this young clerk. His face was unfamiliar, his eyes holding a clumsy kindness, just like Ethan 19 years ago. "Back then we met at a milk tea shop," he clumsily said. "Your cup spilled," and handed me a stack of napkins. I took them and wiped the milk tea stain off my skirt, looked up, and saw the tips of his ears turn red. "No problem." Oliver scratched the back of his head. Would you like me to help carry your things to your car? It's windy outside." I shook my head. The shopping cart was still by the register. I didn't want to touch any of the items inside anymore, the ribs, the bean curd, his favorite snacks, every one of them mocking me. I picked up the plastic bag with the strawberries, the ones Ethan had set on the carton when he came in. I took them, I don't know why, maybe just because I didn't want them left in that storage room. Stepping out of the supermarket, the evening wind hit my collar, cold. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, a message from Aunt Chen. "Lynn Wan, are you coming back for dinner today? I made pork rib soup. Xiao Bao says he misses his grandpa and grandma." Aunt Chen was Ethan's mother, 70 years old, with bad knees that made her use a cane. Every Saturday afternoon, without fail for 19 years, I would take the two kids back to their house for dinner. This week we'd been delayed by shopping, and she was anxious. I stood on the supermarket steps, staring at the message, feeling utterly hollow. The old lady had no idea that while her son was out shopping every Saturday, he was also making time for another woman who would soon give her a third grandchild. I took a taxi home. The driver had the radio on. The hostess chirped about what a nice day it was for a walk. In the rearview mirror, my face stared back, fine lines at the corners of my eyes, pale lips. I reclined the seat, lay back, and closed my eyes. The shopping bag sat at my feet. One strawberry rolled out and I crushed it with my shoe, sticky on the sole. It was nearly dark when I got home. The light in the entryway was on. The two kids were sitting on the living room carpet building Legos. When they heard the door, they looked up in unison and called out, "Mom's home." The elder was 11, the younger 8, both losing baby teeth, their smiles showing gaps, just like Ethan. I set the shopping bag on the dining table, took off my shoes, walked over, and patted both their heads. Their hair was soft and fluffy, smelling of shampoo. "Where's Dad?" Bao asked. "Dad, he's got something on," I said, my voice hoarse. I cleared my throat. "He's not coming back for dinner tonight. Grandma made rib soup, we'll go to Grandma's later." Xiao Bao ran over and hugged my legs, looking up. "Mom, why are your eyes red?" I crouched and picked him up. At 8 he was already heavy, and my arms ached a little. The light fell on the back of his head, the fine baby hairs edged in gold, his nose round, his warm breath on my neck. I buried my face in his shoulder, and all the sounds I'd held in all the way home finally shattered into pieces, falling onto the soft fabric of his school uniform. "Mom's fine," I said, my voice muffled. "Mom, just got some sand in her eyes." Bao put down his Lego and walked over. At 11, he was already up to my shoulder. He frowned at me, his expression just like Ethan's, but his eyes held something Ethan never had, serious, unguarded worry. He patted my back and said softly, "Don't cry, Mom. Grandma says adults get sick if they cry too much." I let go of Xiao Bao, stood up, ruffled Da Bao's hair, and forced a smile. "Mom's not crying. Go change, we're heading to Grandma's." The kids cheered and ran to get their jackets. I stood in the living room, looking at the shopping bags spread on the dining table. The ribs had leaked water, staining the paper bag with a dark patch. My phone buzzed again, this time Ethan. "I'll come home tonight. Don't tell Mom. Wait for me to talk to you." I stared at that message for a long time, then flipped my phone face down on the table. The kitchen faucet hadn't been turned off properly. Drip, drip, drip. The living room TV was still on, cartoons chattering in the background. Everything looked the same as usual except for the shopping bag on the table, except for the half pot of kanji left in the fridge from yesterday, except for the 3 rows of ironed shirts in the closet, except for the surveillance video in my pocket. I didn't know how to tell 2 children that their father had another child with another woman, nor how to face both elderly parents at the old house and force a smile. 19 years, my whole life had been tied to Ethan, too tightly, for too long. Now someone had come with scissors to cut the rope, and I realized I didn't know how to stand on my own. On the way out, Da Bao held my hand and asked, "Mom, is Dad really not coming with us to Grandma's?" "Yeah, he's busy." "What about next week? Will he be busy next week too?" I crouched to tie his shoes, my fingers kept trembling. It took 3 tries to get the bow right. When I looked up, Da Bao was looking down at me, his eyes clean and bright, like 2 pieces of glass. I suddenly remembered last year on his birthday, when Ethan had to work late. Da Bao faced the 11 candles on his cake and said, "I wish Dad could come home for dinner every day." At the time I laughed and told him Dad worked hard to support us, we had to be understanding. Now I understood, kids see everything. They just don't say it. The walk from our place to the old house took 20 minutes, along a path lined with plane trees. The late spring breeze blew, the leaves were still sparse, and streetlights shone through the branches, scattering fractured light on the ground. Xiao Bao ran ahead, Da Bao walked slowly beside me, holding my hand, his palms slightly sweaty and warm. "Mom," Da Bao suddenly said, "did you and Dad have a fight?" I paused. "No. But you cried earlier." He looked up at me, taller now, his upturned face just like his father's. "Last year I overheard Dad on the phone, saying wait for me a little longer to someone. His voice was so gentle, different from how he talks to you. I wanted to tell you, but then I forgot." I crouched and hugged him tight. At 11, he wasn't as soft as he used to be, his frame was bony, but his shoulders were trembling. He put his arms around my neck and whispered, "Don't be sad, Mom. No matter what Dad does, I'm on your side." I'd walked this path for 19 years, plane tree fluff in spring, cicadas in summer, crunching leaves in autumn, cold wind down the scarf in winter. Ethan always used to walk on my left, because that was the side closest to the traffic. He'd say, "If a car comes, I'll block it first." Later, as work took over, I often walked this path alone with the 2 kids. On the rare occasions he joined, he'd walk ahead, on the phone, and I'd follow behind watching his back, shiny leather shoes, sharp suit shoulders, like a stranger who'd succeeded in life. Now that man was someone else's husband, or at least, the father of another woman's child. The video was still in my pocket, showing him bending to kiss Chloe's forehead. With a tenderness that felt like first love, a tenderness I hadn't seen in a long time. Or maybe I just hadn't looked at him closely in a long time. By the time we reached the old house, Aunt Chen was setting the table. Seeing us, she beamed, her eyes crinkling. "Oh, my darlings, wash your hands, dinner's ready." She wore an apron, her hair pinned up, a few strands of white loose at her ears. In the living room, father-in-law sat in his wheelchair, reading the newspaper with reading glasses. When he heard us, he looked up and smiled at me, then went back to his paper. I carried the shopping bag into the kitchen. Aunt Chen followed and took it from me, pulling things out as she chattered. "You bought so much again, we have everything at home." "Oh, your eyes, why are they swollen?" "Didn't sleep well." I put the ribs in the sink and turned on the faucet, Water rushed noisily. Mom, Ethan won't be back for dinner tonight. He has a work thing. Aunt Chen sighed. That boy, always with work. You bear with him, all right? Oh, by the way, last week he told me he booked a hotel for you all to go to the beach this summer, said it's a surprise for you. The ribs slipped from my hands into the sink, splashing water everywhere. A surprise. Last week he told me he was going on a 4-day business trip to Shenzhen. So that was the hotel booking. For whom? Chloe? Me? Or both? I gripped the edge of the sink, watching water run over the pale blood on the ribs, my soapy hands growing white and wrinkled. Lin Wan? Aunt Chen came closer, studying my face. Are you feeling unwell? You're so pale. I'm fine. I forced a smile. Mom, I'll go check on the kids. When I walked out, Xiao Bao was lying on his grandpa's lap, chattering about his classmate Xiaomei's hamster. Grandpa chuckled, his fingers stroking Xiao Bao's head. Da Bao sat on the sofa, head down, looking at his phone. I glanced over, his screen showed Ethan's WeChat chat, no new messages. He seemed to be looking at the profile picture, a family portrait of the 4 of us, taken last autumn, when we were all smiling so beautifully it might have been a front. Halfway through dinner, the doorbell rang. Aunt Chen wiped her hands and answered it. I heard a familiar voice at the door, Ethan's, slightly out of breath. Mom, I'm back. Bought some fruit on the way. My chopsticks stopped. Both kids looked up toward the door. Da Bao's mouth twitched. Xiao Bao had already jumped off his chair and run over, yelling "Daddy, Daddy" as he threw himself at Ethan. Ethan scooped him up with one arm, carrying a bag of fruit in the other, and walked into the dining room with a smile. His eyes swept over me, paused, then shifted away. Didn't you have work? Father-in-law adjusted his reading glasses, his tone flat. It ended early, so I came back. Ethan set the fruit on the sideboard, carried Xiao Bao over, and sat down. He naturally reached for my bowl, served himself some soup, and set the bowl down in front of him. He'd been doing this for 19 years, never once asking if I wanted the soup. My bowl was his bowl, my things were his things, I was his person, and in his mind, apparently, that was always true. I was always there, whether he noticed or not. Xiao Bao chatted on his lap about kindergarten. Ethan responded with aha and but his eyes kept drifting toward me. I didn't look back, just kept my head down eating. I bit into a rib, and a bone scraped against my tooth, clack. Da Bao, sitting beside me, silently picked the leanest piece of rib from his bowl and put it into mine, whispering, Mom, have this. That meal stretched on endlessly. Aunt Chen prattled on about family gossip, father-in-law occasionally grunted, Xiao Bao never stopped talking. Ethan played the role of good father and good son, chopsticks never stopping, words never lacking. Only Da Bao and I ate quietly. One bowl of rice took 40 minutes, and in the end Aunt Chen took my bowl away and said, if you can't eat, don't force it, go home and rest. On the way back, Ethan walked on my left, his old position. The 2 kids ran ahead. He reached out and lightly touched the back of my hand. I pulled away. Lin Wan, he lowered his voice, let's talk properly when we get home, all right? I said nothing. The streetlights stretched his shadow long, falling at my feet like a threshold I couldn't cross. Xiao Bao called from ahead, Mom, Dad, hurry up. Ethan ran to catch up and took Xiao Bao's hand, then glanced back at me. Under the streetlight, his gaze was exactly the same as it had been 19 years ago outside the milk tea shop, pleading, tender, as if everything could be undone if he just looked at me that way. But what in 19 years could ever be undone? Back home, after the kids washed up and went to their rooms, I sat on the living room sofa. The TV was off. The day's purchases were spread on the coffee table. Ethan came out of his study with a folder and sat across from me on the single sofa, the coffee table between us. Lin Wan, he opened the folder to reveal several pages. This is the agreement I drafted. The property, savings, company shares, I'm willing to give you half, no, 2/3, as long as you. When are you marrying her? I cut him off. He froze. He opened and closed the folder, his fingers rubbing the edges, making a rustling sound. I never planned to marry her. She said after the baby's born she'll go back to her hometown and won't. Ethan, a woman carrying your child, and she says she won't. I looked at him, suddenly exhausted, as if I'd run a 19-year marathon and the finish line was shrouded in fog. How old is she? 25. 26. When you started with her, did you ever think about how old Xiao Bao is? When you accompany her to checkups every Saturday, do you think about Da Bao telling his classmates my dad goes grocery shopping with us every week? You think you hid it well? Even a store clerk couldn't stand by and watch. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. The strawberry box was still open on the table, the berries crowded together, glaringly red. I pushed the box toward him. You bought them. You eat them. I don't want what someone else picked over. He looked down at the strawberries. His lashes were long, casting a small shadow beneath his eyes. 19 years ago I'd complimented him on those lashes, and he'd smiled sheepishly and said, "Long lashes don't look good on a guy." Now those lashes trembled, something slipped out from beneath them, a drop of water landing on the plastic box, slowly sliding down its curved surface like a tiny river. I stood up and headed for the bedroom. Lin Wan. I'm sleeping in the guest room tonight. I didn't look back. First, make that agreement clearer. Real estate, savings, equity, and custody of the 2 children. Ethan, don't think you can have both. I vomited for 8 months when I was carrying them. When Da Bao was born, I hemorrhaged and nearly didn't make it off the operating table. Where were you? Drinking with clients. I remember all of it, I just never held it against you before. When the bedroom door clicked shut, I heard him sit in the living room for a long time. The TV stayed off, the lights stayed on. I lay in the guest room bed, the fresh sheets smelling of laundry detergent. The ceiling lampshade had a crack in it from last winter when a heating pipe burst and water damaged it. Ethan said he'd get it fixed. A year later, it was still broken. I closed my eyes, but all I could see was the surveillance footage, his hand on Chloe's belly, and Aunt Chen's words about the hotel surprise. A surprise. I laughed, and as I laughed, tears ran into my pillow, cold against my temples. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, an MMS from an unknown number. A photo, Ethan and Chloe in a restaurant, a cake with a candle in front of her, rose petals scattered around. Underneath the photo, "Hello, sister. I'm Chloe. Ethan has told me a lot about you, and I respect you very much. But the baby in my belly is innocent. I beg you to let us be." The message was sent 10 minutes ago. Ethan had been sitting in the living room, telling me she said she won't affect our lives. I stared at the photo for a long time. Chloe smiled sweetly, her belly round under her dress. Ethan sat across from her, his gaze fixed on her face, a focused tenderness I hadn't seen from him in at least 5 years. I turned the phone over, rolled over, and pulled the blanket over my head. In the darkness, I could still hear my own heartbeat, thud, 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 each beat heavier than the last, like someone hammering at a wall. A wall I'd built brick by brick over 19 years. Now the man on the other side didn't want to stay, he'd climbed over and left, and I was the only one still inside. Outside the guest room window stood a locust tree. The wind rustled its leaves, like the turning of a thick book. 19 years of memories spread out before me, page by page, all trivial everyday moments. The time he first took me to meet his parents and nervously knocked over a glass. Our wedding day when he got drunk and held me, saying I finally married you. When Da Bao was born and he waited outside the delivery room until his legs gave out. The days of my postpartum depression when he came home every day and took me for walks. Were those days real? Or were they just performances, so flawlessly acted that I mistook them for my whole life? Later events surfaced one by one. The day he got promoted and treated the whole company to dinner but didn't call me, they're all colleagues, you'd feel out of place. He bought a new car without discussing it, I only found out when he drove it home. He changed his phone password, company policy. He started traveling more often, his suitcase always containing an extra change of clothes in case I stained something at a business dinner. All those real things were real, only the other side of the truth had been hidden for so long that even I had stopped bothering to lift the curtain. The locust leaves rustled on. I closed my eyes and let those sounds slowly sink, down into the deepest part of my consciousness, like stones falling into dark water, ripples spreading outward in circles, then settling into stillness. Tomorrow I would see a lawyer, go through accounts, settle the ledgers of 19 years. I'd managed the company's back office for 18 of those years. Every expense, every invoice had passed through my hands. The money spent on Chloe couldn't have vanished. There would always be traces. As for Ethan's agreement, I smiled in the dark and pulled the blanket down. The other side of the pillow was cold. The fact that he'd voluntarily offer 2/3 of everything to let him go meant the company's books were worse than I knew, or that Chloe demanded more. Either way, I held more cards than he realized: 18 years of financial records, 2 children, and his parents' blind trust in me. At dawn I got up, splashed water on my face, and looked in the mirror, puffy eyes, dry lips, messy hair, like I hadn't slept at all. And I hadn't, but my mind was clearer than ever. The woman in the mirror was 43, with lines at her eyes and sunspots on her cheekbones. Her laugh lines were deep when she smiled. But her eyes still shone, the same light Ethan had seen 19 years ago at the milk tea shop. He'd wandered too far to see it anymore, but now I saw it myself. In the living room, Ethan's suit jacket hung on the rack. He was already gone. Half the strawberries on the coffee table had been eaten, the other half were carefully wrapped in plastic wrap and put in the fridge, with a sticky note: "Left some for you, washed." His handwriting was still the same, messy, just like him. I tore off the note and threw it away. I opened my phone contacts and scrolled to Lawyer Jew, met at a class reunion, last contacted 3 years ago when I'd referred a divorce case to her. I took a breath and dialed. After 2 rings, she picked up, her voice husky with early morning. "Lynn WAN? So early." "Lawyer Jew," I said, my voice steady, as if reading from a speech I'd already written. "I'd like to consult about a divorce. My husband has been unfaithful and has a child with another woman. I need to know how to best protect my rights and my children's." There was a 2-second silence on the other end, then Lawyer Jew's voice sharpened with professional calm and strength. "All right. If you're free, come to my office this morning. Bring any property documents you have and your marriage certificate. Lynn WAN, don't be scared, I've handled many cases like this. You have advantages, your husband is at fault, the child with the other woman is solid proof, and you say you've managed his company's finances for 18 years, that makes things even better." After hanging up, I sat at the dining table. Morning sunlight slanted through the window, dusted the tabletop with gold. On the fridge was a New Year's painting Xiao Bao had drawn last year, a lopsided rabbit with "I love Mom and Dad" written beside it. Da Bao's school uniform hung over the back of a chair, forgotten from yesterday, a blot of ink on the sleeve. I took the uniform down, poured laundry detergent into a basin, and soaked it. Then I went to knock on Da Bao's door. He wasn't fully awake yet, mumbling groggily. I opened the door, sat on the edge of his bed, and stroked his hair. "Da Bao, Mommy has to go out for a bit today. Can you look after your little brother? There's breakfast in the fridge, just heat it up in the microwave." He turned over, eyes still blurry, looking at me. "Mom, where are you going?" "To see a lady." I leaned down and kissed his forehead. "Mommy has some important things to take care of. You be good at home." He nodded and closed his eyes again. I stood up, and as I reached the door, I heard him mumble behind me, "Mom, you can do it." I stood in the doorway, my back to the morning light, and smiled. Outside the window, a bird perched on the locust tree, chirping. Spring wasn't over yet, the leaves were getting denser every day. "You can do it," I whispered to myself, then walked out and closed the door behind me. Lawyer Jew's office was on the 17th floor of a downtown office tower. The elevator had ads for a gym. A woman in yoga pants was fixing her hair against the mirrored wall. I stood behind her, looking at my reflection. I'd changed into a dark blue blouse for the outing, tied my hair back, put concealer under my eyes, but the signs of a sleepless night were still visible. The elevator dinged, I stepped out, and at the end of the hallway hung a brass plaque reading Zhengheng Law Firm. The glass door let through light and white walls. Lawyer Ju was waiting in her office, 2 cups of coffee on the table. She stood and shook my hand firmly. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair opposite. "Tell me exactly what happened. like you did on the phone. I took out my phone and showed her the surveillance video, then the MMS from Chloe last night. After watching, Lawyer Ju said nothing, typed on her computer, printed a PDF, and slid it to me. This is a divorce agreement template. Take a look. Regarding property division, the law says marital assets are split equally, but if there's evidence of a major fault like infidelity resulting in a child with someone else, you can claim more. The exact proportion depends on the judge's discretion, but your case is clear and well evidenced. You have a strong chance. I looked over the agreement, dense clauses pressed on the paper like a cage of grids. Lawyer Ju took out a blank sheet and drew a diagram while explaining, your first priority is to get a clear picture of your household finances. You said you managed the company's back office for 18 years, do you have copies of the books? What about personal accounts? Properties, vehicles, investments in his name, make a list. I have backup records of all his bank account transactions. I pulled another stack of papers from my bag. It's a habit of mine, I do a yearly financial summary at the end of each year. Last year there were 2 large expenditures I couldn't match to any records, totaling 630,000 yuan. At the time he said it was for an investment project, but I never saw a contract. Lawyer Ju flipped through the papers, raising an eyebrow. 630,000, that's significant. If we can prove that money went to the third party, it's your husband's unauthorized disposal of marital property, and you can claim it back. Also, she pointed at the MMS photo, do you recognize this restaurant? I leaned in. In the background was a decorative wall covered with vintage records, near the window were potted plants. The layout was familiar, it was Time's little house in the west of the city. Ethan had taken me there once last year, saying it was a friend's place with a nice atmosphere for dates. At the time I laughed, saying we'd been married over a decade, why bother with dates? Now I realized he'd taken me there to scout the place, to see if the atmosphere suited his dates with Chloe. Time's little house, West Side, I said. He took me there once last year. Lawyer Ju made notes in her notebook, then closed it and looked at me. Lin Wn, let me ask you a direct question, have you made up your mind to divorce? Or do you want to gather more evidence first and see how he reacts? I was silent for a few seconds. Outside the window, clouds drifted past, blocking the sun then moving on, light flickered across the glass on the desk, reflecting my own face. I thought of Aunt Chen's words about the hotel surprise, Da Bao's arms around my neck last night saying no matter what, I'm on your side, Xiao Bao lying on Ethan's lap chattering about hamsters. Divorce, I said softly but firmly. Lawyer Ju, I want a divorce, and I want custody of the children. I'll fight for what I can regarding property, but I won't let this drag on forever, I still have 2 children to raise, and I have my own life to live. Lawyer Ju nodded, took out a recorder from her drawer, and pressed the record button. All right. Let's start from the beginning, tell me every detail you can recall about those expenditures. Lin Wan, don't worry, many people in your situation have come through my door, and not one has regretted leaving. I spent 3 hours at the firm that morning. When I came out, the sun was high overhead. A noodle shop at the base of the building wafted the scent of scallion oil. I went in and ordered a plain bowl of noodles, eating slowly, head down. My phone sat beside the bowl, the screen dark. Ethan hadn't messaged since morning, probably busy at work, or accompanying Chloe to her prenatal checkup. Saturday morning, the maternity ward of the city hospital was likely crowded. Was he doing the same thing he used to do with me, holding her bag in one hand, steadying her waist with the other, bending to whisper to her belly? I finished the noodles and drank the soup. The last sip was a bit salty, scraping my throat. I paid and walked out, hesitated for a moment on the street, then took a cab to the old house. Aunt Chen was usually home at noon. Father-in-law was still napping, she was watering flowers on the balcony. Hearing the door, she looked up and saw me alone, her face stiffened. Lin Wan? Where's Ethan? He's busy. I set my bag on the shoe cabinet, changed into slippers, and walked over. Mom, I'd like to talk with you about something. The old lady put down the watering can, wiped her hands on a cloth, and studied me warily. What's wrong? Did you two quarrel? I could tell you weren't right last night. Several jasmine flowers had bloomed on the balcony, their faint scent mingling with the sunlight. I took Aunt Chen's arm, helped her sit on the wicker chair, and pulled a small stool to sit facing her. Her knees were bad, sitting too long hurt, but that didn't matter now. I looked into her eyes, so much like Ethan's, with deep wrinkles at the corners, my own face reflected in her pupils. "Mom," I took a deep breath, "Ethan has been seeing someone else. She's pregnant, about 5 or 6 months along. I want to divorce him." The cloth fell from her hand. She stared at me, her mouth twitching, as if she wanted to speak but couldn't. The breeze on the balcony ruffled the loose hairs at her temples. She reached up to smooth them, her fingers trembling. "What did you say?" "I saw surveillance footage yesterday in the supermarket parking lot. Every Saturday, he uses the excuse of going out for a smoke to meet her. It's been half a year." I pulled up the video on my phone and showed it to her. Her hands shook so badly when she took it that it nearly fell. I helped steady it, turning the screen toward her. The clip of Ethan kissing Chloe's forehead played once, twice. On the third time, she abruptly shut off the screen, shoved the phone back into my hand, and leaned back in the chair, her chest heaving. "That beast," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "That beast, how could he? Lynn Wan, you." She suddenly gripped my wrist with shocking strength, her nails digging into my flesh. "Lynn Wan, don't act rashly, I'll stand up for you. Who's that homewrecker? I'll go see her." "Mom." I took her hand, gently prying her fingers open one by one, holding them in my palm. Her hands were cold, knobby, spotted with age. "I'll handle this between Ethan and me myself. I'm telling you so you can be mentally prepared. No matter what happens between us, you'll always be Da Bao and Xiao Bao's grandmother, that won't change. But I didn't want to keep it from you." The old lady's eyes reddened. She turned her head away, looking at the old locust tree outside the balcony, and was quiet for a long time. The wind rustled the thick leaves, a few fell onto the railing, curling at the edges. After a long while, she turned back, her face tight, the corners of her mouth turned down, just the way Ethan looked when he was upset. "Lynn Wan," her voice was hoarse, "you've been married into our family for 19 years, and you haven't had an easy time. When Ethan's father was sick, you took care of him. In the early years of his company, you handled everything for him. You raised 2 kids mostly on your own, I saw it all. If that beast really dares to wrong you, I'll cut him off before I'll let you suffer." My nose stung. She pulled her hand away, wiped her palm on her pants, then cupped my face in both hands, rubbing my temples with her thumbs. "Don't cry, child," she said. "If you divorce, I'll go with you. I'll move in with you, help with the kids if you don't want me underfoot. I'll stay here, but I'll always be on your side." I lowered my head, pressing my forehead against the back of her hand, smelling the laundry detergent on her sleeve mixed with jasmine. 19 years ago, the first time I met the family, she'd held my hand the same way and said, "Your family now." Her hands had been plumper then, warmer in the palm. Now they were thin, but the warmth was still there. At noon, father-in-law woke up. Aunt Chen wheeled him to the table for lunch. She said nothing unusual, just put a little extra food in my bowl. I ate with my head down, hearing father-in-law ask where Ethan was. Aunt Chen replied flatly, "He's dead somewhere." Father-in-law adjusted his glasses, looked at her face, and wisely said no more. After the meal, I helped wash the dishes and wiped down the kitchen before leaving. Aunt Chen saw me to the door, held my hand, and lingered in the doorway for a moment. Finally she patted the back of my hand. "Call me anytime if you need anything. I'm here." On the way home, I stopped at a different supermarket, not the one from yesterday, but a farther one. Pushing the cart slowly through the aisles, my mind was still turning over what Lawyer Ju had said: asset inventory, fund tracing, materials needed before filing. My phone buzzed multiple times in my pocket. I pulled it out. Ethan had called 7 times, and sent a string of WeChat messages, the last one reading, "Lynn Wan, where are you? Mom just called and tore into me, what did you tell her?" I didn't reply. I silenced my phone and put it away. Standing in front of the refrigerated section, picking out yogurt, a young couple nearby was arguing. The woman pushed her cart, shoving the man aside. "You said you'd buy formula last month, and now the baby's been out for 2 days and you're still stalling. The man forced a smile. Tomorrow, let's get your yogurt today, okay? I glanced at them. The man's forced smile overlapped with the one I'd seen on Ethan's face the day before, like the same mask on different people. I grabbed a carton of yogurt, put it in my cart, and walked away. Outside the supermarket, the sun was bright, warming the asphalt. A child nearby was blowing bubbles. Soap bubbles floated into the air, refracting rainbow light before popping one by one, only to be replaced by new ones. I watched for a while, felt my eyes sting, and hurried on. At home, it was past 2. Both kids were in the living room. Da Bao was doing homework. Xiao Bao lay on the rug watching cartoons. Hearing me come in, they looked up and said Mom before going back to what they were doing. I changed clothes and went to the kitchen for a glass of water. My phone buzzed again, this time a voice message from Aunt Chen. I played it. Her voice was hoarse. Lin Wan, the more I think about it, the angrier I get. I called that beast again and gave him another piece of my mind. He hung up on me. My hands are shaking with rage. You've been wronged, child. Your mother-in-law apologizes to you for that unfilial son. I listened, leaned against the sink, and finished the water. I replied, Mom, don't get so worked up, you'll hurt yourself. I'm fine. After sending it, I noticed Ethan had sent several more WeChat messages, the last one a voice note. I didn't open it, but the transcribed text showed, You can't talk to my mom about this, you know she has a bad heart. I tossed my phone on the dining table. The screen lit up briefly then went dark. Xiao Bao got up from the floor, ran over, hugged my legs, and said, Mom, I'm hungry. I crouched down, pinched his cheek, went to the kitchen to warm a bowl of milk, and chopped some strawberries from yesterday into it. He sat cross-legged on the rug, scooping it up spoonful by spoonful, getting milk on his chin and a red smear on his nose. I sat beside him and watched him pick out all the strawberries, leaving half the milk, which he pushed toward me. Mom, you drink it. I took it and sipped, sweet, the strawberry juice dissolving in the milk, the taste of spring on my tongue. Da Bao came over from his desk and handed me a piece of paper filled with handwriting. I took it, a hand-drawn table with the title Family Asset Summary, divided into property, vehicles, savings, and investments, with question marks in each column. I looked up, startled. He scratched the back of his head, the tips of his ears red. I overheard you and Dad arguing last night, he said quietly. You mentioned splitting assets. I thought I should help you figure it out, but I can't remember exactly what we have, so I made a form. Mom, you can fill it in yourself. I looked at the paper. His writing was crooked, some characters spelled with pinyin, but the grid was neat, drawn with a ruler. Da Bao stood before me, 11 years old, growing tall and lean, his pants ending a little short above his ankles. He looked at me with the same light in his eyes as his grandfather did in old photos, earnest, steady, like a newly planted sapling whose roots were already taking hold. Thank you, I said, my voice quivering slightly. I ruffled his hair. Mom will take care of it herself. You focus on your homework. He didn't move. He looked down at me, then crouched to meet my eyes. Mom, I checked Baidu. He pulled out his phone and showed me his search history. One line was how is child custody decided in divorce, another was can an 11-year-old choose which parent to live with. My eyes instantly welled up. He quickly put the phone away, his face reddening. I was just looking, he mumbled. I want to stay with you, and so does little brother. Dad, he's never home. I don't like it. I reached out and pulled him into a hug, my chin on his shoulder. He'd grown, his shoulders weren't round and soft anymore, but bony, pressing against my jaw. But he still smelled the same as when he was little, laundry detergent and a faint sweat, warm. I held him for a long time, until Xiao Bao crawled over and squeezed in between us. The three of us huddled on the sofa without speaking. The cartoon still played on the TV, the afternoon sun slanting in from the west, stretching our shadows long on the wall, overlapping. That afternoon, I opened my computer and began organizing the household's financial records. Ethan didn't know I'd kept all of this 18 years of company account backups, the family balance sheets I'd prepared every year, and screenshots of all his bank account transactions. I sorted them into categories, highlighting suspicious large expenditures in color. Just last year, there were 4 unexplained payments totaling 970,000 yuan. Besides the investment project he'd mentioned, there was another payment of over 300,000 labeled consulting fees, paid to an account I didn't recognize. I screenshot and sent it to lawyer Ju, who quickly replied with a voice message, "That consulting fee is a large amount. Do you recognize the Paris account?" I checked the bank information, a city commercial bank, the account name a pinyin feminine name with an initial C, Chloe. I stared at the screen for a while, then added that clue to my document. My lower back ached, I stood and stretched. It was nearly 6, the kids had made instant noodles themselves and left the bowls in the sink. I went over and washed them, opened the fridge, the ribs from yesterday were still there. I hesitated, then took them out to thaw. No matter what, meals had to be made. Ethan came back around 7. His footsteps were heavy, carrying the smell of cigarettes. Both kids were in their rooms doing homework. I was the only one in the living room, looking over my laptop on the sofa. He changed into slippers, walked over, and stood in front of the coffee table, looking down at me, his tie loose, 2 buttons of his shirt undone. "You told Mom?" His voice was tight, like a string about to snap. "Yes." I didn't look up, kept looking at the screen. "Lin WN," he crouched, reaching to close my laptop. "You know Mom has a bad heart. She called me today, crying, couldn't even speak. She's crying because of what you did, not because I told her." I looked up at him. The man crouched by the coffee table was a different person from the one in the storage room yesterday. His eyes were red, his lips chapped, stubble on his chin. In 19 years, I'd rarely seen him so disheveled. Even in the hardest early days of his business, he'd never looked this haggard. But I no longer wanted to feel sorry for him. That switch had been broken, click, and could never be turned back on. He withdrew his hand, his head hanging, kneeling by the coffee table, folding into himself. "I know I was wrong," he said, his voice low and muffled. "Lin WAN, I know I've let you down. But Mom is old, you can't put this burden on her. Ethan, you're still worried about Mom's health?" I closed my laptop and set it aside, leaning forward to look at his face. "Have you ever thought about me? How have I managed these 19 years? When did you start lying to me? Last year? The year before? Even earlier? Whose account is that consulting fee? Chloe's. You transferred over 300,000 to her and called it a consulting fee. What did you take her for? A business partner?" His complexion changed, from red to white, then to gray. His lips quivered, his gaze shifting from me to the corner of the coffee table. "That money, she said she wanted to open a flower shop, and You lent her money for a flower shop?" I nodded. "Yesterday you told me she didn't know you had a family, and today you transferred over 300,000 to her for a flower shop. Ethan, are you kidding me? You'd transfer over 300,000 to a woman who doesn't know you're married? She thinks you're a rich, single good guy, right? And you're lying to her and to me, playing both sides, and you still think you're innocent." He opened his mouth but nothing came out. The living room fell silent, save for the ticking of the clock on the wall. After a long pause, he spoke, his voice rough as if scoured with sandpaper. "She really didn't know I had a family. I told her I was divorced, raising 2 kids alone. She said she loved flowers and wanted a little shop of her own, So you used our marital property to invest in her." I stared into his eyes. "Ethan, what was your company's profit last year? Over 4 million, right? You transferred over 300,000 to her and thought I wouldn't notice? I do the books every year, did you forget? Did you think I just stay home with the kids and do nothing?" He shot me a glance, a flash of panic in his eyes. That look was too familiar, the same one I'd seen whenever I caught him in small lies before, stashing away pocket money, secretly buying a fishing rod, hiding his ashtray and claiming he'd quit smoking when he hadn't. I used to never make a fuss about those. I'd laugh, scold him a little, and let it go. Now that same panic was in his eyes, but this lie was too big enough to shake the foundation of 19 years. "Lin WN, he pressed his hands on the coffee table, knuckles white. "Listen to me. I'll handle Chloe, I'll tell her everything. I'll give you whatever property you want, all of it, the company shares. I don't want your company shares. I cut him off. I want the money, the house, and custody of the children. As for your company, you can keep it and run it with Chloe. I have no interest in meddling in your affairs. He froze. The shadow under the coffee table split his face in two, half in light, half in darkness, staring at me as if he didn't recognize me. You. Lawyer Jew has already drafted the divorce agreement. I stood up, looking down at him. I'll send it to you tomorrow. Sign it, and we part amicably. Don't sign, and I'll file for divorce. Ethan, it's your choice. I turned and walked toward the guest room. After a few steps, I heard him get up, footsteps chasing after me, a hand grabbing my wrist. I turned back. He was shaking all over, his eyes redder than before, his lower lip bitten white. Lynn Wan, his voice broke completely. Can't you give me one more chance? 19 years of feelings, are you throwing it all away just like that? I looked into his eyes, my own face reflected back, small and blurred. I thought of yesterday in the storage room, when I saw that surveillance footage, my mind full of why he'd lied, why all those years of affection had dissipated so easily, why he hadn't given me a single truthful word. But now, standing in front of him, this man I'd shared a bed with for 19 years, I suddenly no longer wanted to ask why. Ethan, I said, gently pulling his hand off my wrist, I gave you many chances. I gave you chances when you came home late every night, when you changed your phone password, when you told her wait for me a little longer. You're the one who threw them away. He stood still, his arms dropping, his whole body seeming to lose its spine. I walked back to the guest room and closed the door, leaning against it for a moment. I heard him walk over, stop at the door, wait a long time, then walk away, footsteps fading, finally the bedroom door closing with a soft click.